2 months ago, the American people elected Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States of America. Thank you for that very generous applause. It's okay. There are no election deniers on our side of the aisle. You see?
And there you go. That was House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries pointing out Republicans' history of election denialism ahead of today's anniversary of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Hours from now, Congress is set to certify Donald Trump's win ahead of his inauguration in a few weeks. The transfer of power to Trump is shaping up to be peaceful, unlike the January 6th he denied President Biden 4 years ago. So good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. With us, we have the co-host of our fourth hour, Jonathan Lemire. Congratulations.
Thank you.
President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass. He's the author of the weekly newsletter, Home and Away, available on Substack. A lot to talk to you about today, here and abroad. Rogers Chair in the American Presidency at Vanderbilt University, historian Jon Meacham is with us. And the new host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale. Congratulations. Great first show. We are so happy to have you on the team. Joe, let's start off on this January 6th. Do you want to go there? 4 years ago was quite a different day than today.
Yeah, I do. And I'd love to, we saw the opening shot. TJ, can we get the shot of the Capitol? Just an absolute blizzard that is going to be setting in over Washington today, expecting anywhere from 10 inches to a foot of snow there. And so I just think for a blizzard of words regarding Shays' Rebellion and the French and Indian War, I want to go to Jon Meacham in Nashville, Tennessee, safely away from the snowstorm there. But John, I'd love to get your thoughts this morning on January the 6th. We still have, and I saw something a really moving story today about a Capitol Hill cop who had said his whole life he either wanted to be a race car driver or he wanted to be a police officer at the Capitol. He took his life a few weeks after the January 6th riots. It was too much for him to contemplate and to bear sort of PTSD. All in all, there were 4 police officers who died. Their families mourned them this morning and died, the families say, as a result of January the 6th. There were also others that were swept into the madness of that moment, who passed. And so here we are, and Hakeem Jeffries is exactly right. There were those 4 years ago who pushed back against a peaceful transfer of power in the most violent of ways. And yet, how beautiful that Hakeem was able to stand up and say, we lost. We salute you. We hand the gavel to you, basically, of power in Washington, D.C. Why? Not because we love what you stand for. Not because we love the campaign that you ran. Not because we believe that what you're going to do is going to be good for Washington. But we do this because we love America. This is what people who have loved America for over 240 years have done, and we Democrats, we do it again today.
The first time this happened was March 4th, 1801, shortly after the Shays' Rebellion, just if you're keeping score, when Thomas Jefferson walked from his boarding house on Capitol Hill to become the first president not of the governing party of Washington and Adams, as informal as those labels were then. And he gave a really important inaugural address, probably the second most important thing he ever wrote behind the Declaration of Independence. And he said, we're all Republicans, we're all Federalists, and every difference of opinion does not have to be a difference of principle. But there are some differences of principle. And a difference of principle is whether or not you acknowledge results you don't like. And that's the essence of life in a rules-based order. Otherwise, it's all kindergarten and the teacher's gone. And that is what we have to push back against again and again and again. I don't know about you, except for remembering possibly in passing that both Vice President Richard Nixon and Vice President Al Gore had to preside over their own, certifying their own defeats in the presidential race. I had never really thought much about the election certification. I think I remember Claire McCaskill saying with you all, you know, sometimes she didn't go when she was in the Senate because it just happened, right? It was like, you know, oh, you know, they're servicing the water fountains. You know, you don't go to that. So, you know, but now it's important.
Yeah.
And a final point is this is not a partisan talking point. This is not a just a way to hammer away at Donald Trump. To remember what happened on January 6th is an act of remembrance in the purest form. And remembrance in the traditions, Joe, that you and I and so many other people came from, remembrance is not nostalgia. It's an act of agency. You remember things that you either want to emulate or you want to avoid. And we want to avoid ever again having American democracy on the knife's edge.
And John, you have said so many times through the years, and I think it's important to remember this today. You've said so many times that American history has always been on the knife's edge. Maybe, you know, if a battle had been fought one way or a retreat had gone another way, we may have lost American democracy. I think it's so important with the madness that follows every election, where every trend is exaggerated, where every victory is turned into a massive landslide, where suddenly X and Elon Musk and Bros and you name it are in charge of America for the rest of time in memoriam. It is important for us to remember, those of us who know history, those of us who have lived history, those of us who have understood that actually a victory is just the beginning of a political battle, a democratic political battle, and you never know where it's going to end. I always think about the two greatest landslides in modern American history. 1964, LBJ, 49 states. He's run out of politics. His own party gets rid of him. I could say Newt Gingrich became the first speaker in 40 years, Republican speaker in 40 years. He was run out of town 4 years later. Richard Nixon, 49 states out of 50 he wins. And of course, soon after that, he's being ridden out of town. He doesn't even last 2 years after winning 49 states. I'm not saying this is going to happen to Donald Trump. That's not my point at all. My point is that for the past 2 months since the election, there have been such massive, over-sweeping statements about the scale and the scope of this victory and what it will mean for America for the next generation that you forget that one candidate got 49.9% and the other got 48.5%. Wisconsin, less than a percentage point. Michigan, 1.5 percentage points. By the way, in those two states, Democrats won the Senate race. This remains an evenly divided country, and no one no one, to paraphrase William F. Buckley, no one is held hostage to the results of the last election other than what the Constitution tells us. And so we are still a divided nation. And yes, Donald Trump won despite January 6th, but that half the nation was okay with that. Half the nation not okay with that. The debate continues in full.
Absolutely. And as Ronald Reagan used to say, whenever he wanted to see whether a prediction was true or an inevitable result was going to come along, he would ask President Dewey how that worked out. History's always like this. It is contingent. It is conditional. And this is not, again, to our Republican friends, this is not to diminish President Trump's victory. It's not.
Not at all.
It is to put it in context. It is to put it in context, which is that, as you mentioned, 1964, 1972, and 1984 were the only elections since World War II, and really, we could go back farther, but I won't because Mika will cut me off, where more than 58, 59% of us agreed on who should be president. And we talked about this, and I really will leave you with this, is 1868. I remember thinking a couple of months ago, what was a presidential election that should have been 80-20, right? There are 20% of people, we can get 20% of people to say anything. So 80-20, what should it have been? And I thought 1868. Right? Grant's running, triumphant Union general. Horatio Seymour, the former governor of New York, who was a white supremacist, wanted to repeal the 14th and 15th Amendments, the verdict of the Civil War. It was a 5-point race. In 1868, someone who was against what had happened in the Civil War nearly won the presidency of the United States in an era when some black folks could vote in the South and still a lot of white Confederates were excluded from the franchise. And it was a 4.5, 5-point race when they were still burying the Civil War dead. All of which is to say that as long as both sides, to use that phrase, as long as both sides acknowledge the supremacy of the will of the people and the rule of law and the viability of constitutional norms, as long as everybody agrees on the rules, let's have the fight. What January 6th was about, and is about, present tense, is what happens when some people step out of that constitutional covenant and try to end the debate. The debate has to go on, but it goes on in a constitutional covenant. And what January 6th is a reminder that not everybody will follow those rules.